Sometimes we can take life a little bit too seriously. So today I want to share with you 4 life tips that I learned from a 4-year-old while I was teaching him how to ride a bike. Before getting to today's episode, don't forget, if you're on YouTube, to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, don't forget to give us a follow. So I taught my partner's little lad how to ride his bike. He's 4 years old. And while I was going through this whole process, I thought, there's some real valuable lessons here. So to give you a bit more context, over 3 weeks, I taught him from going to not riding a bike at all to fully, without stabilizers, any support, riding a bike fully, pushing off on his own, and he'd absolutely nailed it. And within the first session, after 45 minutes, he was fully capable and confident of riding by himself. He just couldn't quite push off or brake. Now, the first lesson that I learned was committing to a plan, because amazing progress can be made when you actually commit to a plan. When you've got a plan, you know what you're doing and you stick to it. And again, as a young 4-year-old, he had no comprehension to really think about it. He was like, okay, this is what we're doing, let's go. And that's something that we don't do. As adults, we try and overcomplicate it. We either overcomplicate it or we don't actually commit. We don't commit at all. Like, we kind of got a bit of a plan and we're kind of like, we kind of dip our toes in. Or we go all in, but we don't actually have a plan. As a 4-year-old, you just went, okay, cool, let's go. You're telling me that in 3 weeks I can do this. Okay, riding a bike. I want to learn to ride a bike. Let's go. And he was fully committed. We had a plan. He knew the plan, and then off we went. So first point is commit to the plan. Have a plan, commit to the plan. That's all we need to do. Don't half-ass it. Stop dipping your toes in. Go all in. Have a plan, go all in. Number 2, we're born with resilience. Every single one of us is born with resilience. The problem is we think that resilience is something we either have or we don't have. We all have it. The thing that we don't realize is that resilience is a skill set, meaning it's perishable. Just like a muscle in the gym. When you work it, it grows. When you don't work it, it atrophies or gets smaller. Same with resilience. If you don't practice resilience, if you're not aware of resilience, if you're not doing things to build your resilience, you will lose that ability. And essentially, it's that bounce back ability. But it's not just bouncing back, because the actual definition of the word resilience, I'll pop it up here, basically talks about how when something happens, we go back to a previously good condition. But I don't believe we do. So the School of Life definition of resilience, which I'm also going to pop up on here if you're on YouTube and on Spotify, talks about becoming enhanced. We become enhanced, and then we also grow and learn from this experience, which we do. And I saw this in the 4-year-old. Like, he fell off on the bike, but he got straight back up, and then he went again. And I was asking him, like, what happened? Like, what went wrong? Said, I leaned over a little bit too much. So then he course corrected. And that's what resilience is all about. Most of the time we sit in the pain. Something happens and we sit in the pain. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes when he fell off, he got a bit upset. But within a matter of seconds, right, let's go again. He wanted to get back up again. He wanted to get back on the bike again. And he learned his lesson. Pain plus the reflection. You have to reflect. I talk about it almost every week on this. You've got to reflect. And that's what he did. One time he put the brakes on too hard, which meant he fell over. Okay, I put my brakes on too hard. I'm not going to do that next time. Another time he leant over too far. I'm not going to do that next time. And that's the difference. We have to reflect. We all have the ability to be resilient. You've been resilient when you learned to walk. You'd have first taken a few steps, fallen over, you'd have course corrected, you'd have learned. When you learn to ride a bike, you have that resilience within you. You have a lot more resilience within you than you don't actually realise. Number 3, arrogance comes before a fall. Now, sometimes when we're flying and things are going really, really well, we forget about the things that actually got us there. We think we know, oh, no, I don't help anymore. I've got this. I'm all good. Like, I don't need anybody else. Now, newsflash, you always need people. Like, you're never good enough to do something by yourself. You always need some form of support, no matter how small. Look at any successful person, and they will tell you they never did anything by themselves. Even Elon Musk, he had a good team around him. Jeff Bezos has a good team around him. Sports athletes have a good team around them. Every single person, no matter how much they take credit for stuff, they know they've got a good team around them. And this was, I think, on the 3rd week. No, the 2nd week, he was absolutely smashing it. He was doing absolutely amazing. And I was kind of just jogging behind him. I was giving him some tips. And he kept saying, I know. And then there's a bend coming up. I was like, remember to turn. I know. He forgot to turn. He didn't look where he was going. And then he ended up veering into a bush. And again, he dust some stuff off and we went again. But it's really interesting how we do that, don't we? We think, oh, no, I've got this. I've got it now. Don't need any help. No, you always need help. You always need support. And if it's stuff you already know, that's not a problem. Because I learned this in the fitness industry. A lot of the coaches that used to be in and around me at the gyms I was working at, they thought they kind of knew everything. Oh, no, sorry, I know that. Whereas with me, I would always go to workshops, seminars. Even if I already knew, like, why are you going to take? You already know that. Because I'm looking for the one nugget that I can actually take and learn and use and implement. And even if I go there and I know 99% of the stuff, Okay, well then it confirms to me that I know the 99% of the stuff. And it's just a good refresher for me. And sometimes we can forget that. Now, before going to the final point, once again, if you've taken any value from today's episode, don't forget to like and share it with a friend. If on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, don't forget to give us a subscribe and a follow. Now, the final point number 4, adjusting with change. So after the 4th week, he'd absolutely nailed this. He's on absolute fire. And again, we did the same route. And on this one particular route, it's a bit of a hill. And he used to love going down the hill. Absolutely bombed it along. But this one time went out, it had been raining a few hours before. And what he hadn't taken into consideration is that this same slope was a little bit different, maybe a little bit slippy. And again, even though I'd already told him, he hadn't experienced it. And he kind of went down the hill, skidded, and then fell off. And again, scraped himself a little bit badly. But there's a lesson in that. And there's a lesson for him that even when you think you've got it nailed, if you aren't ready for change, which is inevitable, things are always going to change, you can get knocked down. And again, even just because you knew how to ride around the estate that I'm on, the area that I'm on, actually, when you go to another area, he's not going to know that terrain. It changes. So then you have to go back to the basics. You have to remember the basics in those times. And again, at that moment, he kind of forgotten a little bit. He wasn't paying as much attention. He kind of like, oh no, I've got this now. He wasn't paying as much attention. Rather than thinking, oh, actually, I've not been out after it's just rained. I need to be a little bit more aware. And we can all get guilty of that. I know that I can as well, where things get a little bit comfortable. It's like, oh, this is great. Remember, change is inevitable. Change, life is always changing. That is the one thing that we know in life is a certain change. Nothing stays the same. The seasons change, everything changes. So you've got to be able to be flexible. You've got to be able to adapt. You've got to be able to change. We've got to be able to have your own back and know, no matter what goes on here, there's basic principles that I'm going to apply to is going to help me navigate this change. Hope you're taking value from today's 4 lessons I learned from a 4-year-old. See you next week. Take it easy.